When I was about 10 years old, one late night, my friend's parents took us out for ice cream. It was about 9:30 p.m., and the small town we were in had settled down for the night, most businesses having already closed up shop. At the time, our town had less than 9,000 people living in it. My friend's parents were both insanely busy and successful people. They owned many houses and rented them out. His dad owned his own business with at least 200 employees. His mother was a college professor, worked in a hospital, and did something else online. This meant that they were also pretty inattentive parents. My friend and his brother on multiple occasions broke furniture and other things fighting, and they wouldn't notice for days. They never made a big deal out of it either. After pulling up away from the store just enough that you couldn't see the car from the inside, due to other cars being parked closer, presumably the employees, my friend's parents got out of the car and went ahead of us into the ice cream shop. They didn't realize that we were still in the car. Their car had this weird automatic seatbelt system, and when I opened my door, the belt wasn't disengaging like it was supposed to. I had trouble getting it off me, so my friend tried to help me. Eventually we figured it out and got out of the car. As we step onto the sidewalk, an old man, late 50s or early 60s, intercepts us, really beady looking eyes. Looking back, I wonder if he might have been high on something, but at the time he just seemed off. "You kids want to buy a mountain bike?" he asked, half-crooked smile and lazy eye giving him this incredibly off-putting appearance, especially after we heard his voice. He sounded like a smoker. His teeth were yellow, and we could smell his awful breath from where we were standing. To give you an idea as to what I was like at that age, I was incredibly, frustratingly naive. You could run just about anything by me, and with little effort I would believe it. I was so naive, I took the fun out of it for many people who tried to trick me, because even after explaining they lied to me, I would shrug and act like it didn't matter either way. It would take me a while to understand regardless. Despite this, even I knew something was off about this guy. Why would we need a mountain bike?" my friend asked before I got the chance to ask anything myself. "Well, 'cause you kids like to go hiking, don't you? Mountain bikes make it way easier." "But there's two of us," I responded. "What if we both want a mountain bike? Who gets to have it?" This is where he made his first attempt to get us away from where we were. "Well, I have another one at my house." "But we don't have any money. We're kids. How are we going to pay for them?" my friend asked. The man went silent for a minute and just stared at us. "You know what? You can pay me back later for it. It's right over there in my van." He pointed across the parking lot, but we didn't see any van. "It's behind that building right there. Now, I don't normally do this, but you seem like trustworthy kids to me." And that's when my friend and I looked at each other and decided it was time to go ahead and get his parents. We'd heard enough from this guy and were seriously creeped out. As we started to walk past him, he backed up and got in our way again. At this point, I'm wondering why my friend's parents hadn't come out of the Baskin Robbins yet. Surely they realized we weren't there. Maybe they saw me struggling with my seatbelt and just assumed it was taking us a while to get it figured out. Either way, I didn't see them yet. "You kids can't walk away from this. This is the best deal you're ever going to get on mountain bikes," the man stated condescendingly. "How stupid would you feel knowing you could have had a bike for free?" "We already have bikes," my friend muttered. "But I bet they weren't mountain bikes," the man growled. He seemed angry at this point. His friendly demeanor had turned to frustration. He started to walk towards us when my friend's dad walked out of the Baskin Robbins and asked us what was taking so long. The old man reeled and pushed his way past us, walking briskly until he full-on sprinted behind a building. Neither of us said anything. We were too shaken. Something else I should mention about my friend's parents is that while they were inattentive, They were the two most sincere and genuine human beings I've ever met, always seeing the good in people and denying any bad even existed. I really don't think his dad pieced together what he saw, and without us giving any indication that something was wrong, he likely had no idea. It was days before we even talked to each other about it, months before we brought it up to anyone else. I shudder to think what would have happened to us, and my friend's dad not left a Baskin Robbins when he did. It's something I push to the back of my head often, but it crops up every now and then. It's been long enough that I think I'm ready to tell this story. Last year, I was dog-sitting for my aunt. The dog is small, sweet, and a little skittish. I had work most of the week, so I was just living in the house for the time being. It's a nice house. Not big enough to feel empty if you're alone, but not small enough to feel cramped either. The only rooms I used were the kitchen, bathroom, living room, and guest room. My last day of work this particular week was a double shift. I was excited because after this, I had 2 days off. I planned on using them to introduce the dog to RuPaul's Drag Race. I usually try to keep good spirits for a double shift, because regardless of the time and annoying customers, extra money is always needed. My old job was a barista and cashier. Mornings are always busy, and nights are slow. On weekends, people are more concerned with coffee and breakfast than anything else we may have to offer. I was having a nice time, actually, because this day was turning out to be not as hectic as the previous ones that week, one even involving a small fire. As the morning rush line was dwindling, the limited tables in the restaurant came into view, and I started people watching. As I slowly scanned the customers eating bagels and reading the paper, my eyes met a man at a laptop. He had long, dirty hair and a bit of stubble. He stared at me with a little too much intensity. I wondered if he found my people watching rude, so I decided to clean and restock instead. It didn't take long for a line to reform, so I returned to my register. Once again, after a while, the line died down, and I could see the few tables in the front. The man was still there, and he was still staring at me. Every now and then he would look at his computer, and then back to me. It almost felt like he was looking right through me, or like he could see every part of me. It felt so uncomfortable that I went and cleaned in the back of the restaurant, out of his sight. After the next rush, I took my break and sat far away as I could from the man. He was out of my sight, and I was out of his. When I came back from my break, the man was finally gone. My manager asked me if I had interacted with him at all. I told her about him making eye contact with me, but that nothing else really happened. She told me that the man had been watching porn on his laptop, and she had asked him to leave. So that was weird enough. This man had been watching porn and staring at me. I really wish this is where the story had stopped. Hours passed and the rest of the day was entirely normal, despite me and a few female coworkers feeling a slight edge. We were in the process of closing, which is actually a process I really enjoy. We're well in, and I'm almost done with my assigned jobs, when my manager comes up to me again. She informs me that the man had found his way back into the restaurant at some point, and she found him hiding in a back corner. She chased him out by threatening to call the police. She knew that earlier in the day he seemed to be paying attention specifically to me. She said I could finish up whatever I wanted or needed to, but afterwards she strongly advised me to get home as soon as possible. She even offered to walk me to my car. I took both offers, and quickly got my things together and clocked out. My aunt's house was not far from work. It was a 5-minute drive at most, which was helpful because I didn't feel crippling anxiety for much longer. I got in the house, and after triple checking that I had locked every door, got into my pajamas. Unsurprisingly, I wasn't ready to sleep yet. Now was the time to introduce the dog to RuPaul's Drag Race. I went into the living room. The living room consists of a couch, 2 chairs, a TV, a window, and the front door. Unfortunately, the porch light was broken, and the window had no curtains. That had me a little stressed, but I was willing to take that over the only other TV in the house, which was the one that exists in the scary basement. Facing the basement TV also included having my back to a sliding glass door facing the very dark woods. No thanks. I was setting up the TV when the dog started growling. I didn't really think much of it. As I said, the dog is skittish, so he growls and barks all the time. I wasn't even looking at him. I was muttering, "Shush, shush," and figuring out how to work the TV. The dog didn't stop, and started to get louder, so I finally put down the remote and turned to face the dog. I froze. The dog was barking at the window, and there was an outline of a man, the exact same build as the one at the restaurant. I screamed as loud as I could, and luckily that was enough for the man to run away from the window. I stood there, frozen for a while. The dog had calmed down, but I hardly felt safe, so I went into the kitchen, grabbed a big knife, and did what any responsible adult would do. I called my mom. She didn't advise me to call the police, and instead came and spent the night with me. I told my aunt. I spent the rest of my time dog-sitting, clutching the knife anytime I slept or took a shower. My aunt also gave me permission to have one friend stay with me every night. Nothing else ever happened. I never even saw the guy come into work again. Part of me wishes I knew who he was or where he went, or even what he wanted with me. I'm glad he was a coward, though, and that all it took to scare him off was my scream and an extra small dog. This is the story of one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I live in a small city, in a small country in the South Pacific. Well, there's definitely weird shit that goes on in this country. Hitchhikers being murdered, gangs, and the like. It's nothing like some of the strange backwater towns of America, and is generally considered to be a very safe place. I'm a female, and this happened last year when I was 24. I sometimes go for walks late at night when I can't sleep, and as I live in an apartment in the middle of town, I walk in areas that are very well populated in the day and weekends, but deserted on weeknights. One night I was feeling particularly down in the dumps and couldn't sleep, so I decided to go out for a walk. I walked up a long, empty street, and then down the block, and made my way back down one of the busiest streets during the day. Being 2 a.m. though, it was completely dead. Even though it was brightly lit, it still had an eerie feeling of emptiness. When I was a few blocks away from my apartment, I saw a guy standing on the footpath up ahead. Nothing unusual, but he looked at me as I approached like he wanted to talk to me. As I passed him by, he handed me a pamphlet, and being the overly polite person I am, I took it. As I walked away, I looked at the pamphlet and saw it was for some kind of Christian thing which was talking about sinners in hell. It was weird that this guy was out at this time of night handing out pamphlets, but I just thought whatever and continued on my way. I got to an intersection where 5 streets meet, and it's one of the busiest in the city. I pressed the button, waiting for the signal to go green so that I could cross. There wasn't any traffic, but I wasn't in a hurry, and due to boy racer cars which sped through the city at night, I decided to wait for the signal. As I was waiting, suddenly Pamphlet guy was standing next to me grinning. "Hi, what's your name? Can I walk you home? Where do you live?" I ignored him as I waited, starting to feel uneasy. Just as the signal went to green, my phone rang. It was my sister calling from Switzerland. She must have got the time zone difference mixed up to be calling at this time, but I happily answered. I crossed the road while I talked to my sister, and got completely engrossed in the story she was telling, to the point where I briefly forgot about the guy. Part way down my street, I looked over my shoulder and saw the guy walking behind me a little way back. I started to get nervous. I told my sister what was happening, while telling myself I was just being paranoid. I got to the front door of my apartment building and saw that the door was standing open. There's a restaurant in the building, and the employees sometimes leave the door open when they're sorting out rubbish at the end of the night, which is against the rules of the body corporate. I pressed the button to the lift, and just as I got in and turned around, I saw the guy had come through the open door and was sprinting as fast as he could towards the lift. The door closed just as he was reaching it, while I repeatedly pressed the button to close the doors, silently panicking. Despite the fact that I could hear the button outside the lift being hurriedly pounded on, the lift thankfully lurched upwards, and a huge wave of relief washed over me. I told my sister what was happening, and she said to hurry to my apartment and lock the door. The lift stopped at my level, the 3rd story, and I got out and walked to the door of my apartment. I fumbled around for my keys because my hands were shaking so bad. Just when I got them out, the door which leads to the stairs swung open. It was Pamphlet guy. He must have seen which floor the lift stopped at and run up the stairs to my level. I jammed the key in the lock and shoved my way inside, but before I could close the door, he stuck his foot inside. I screamed and pushed as hard as I could, slamming the door on his foot. After several slams, he pulled his foot out, and I managed to close and lock the door, putting on the chain. It was then that I realized in my panic that I had left the key in the door on the outside. I watched through the peephole and saw him look down and take the key out of it. And then he stared through the peephole with a creepy, twisted smile on his face. Even though I knew he couldn't see me, it felt like his gaze was boring a hole straight into my mind. I was so scared that I just froze with my sister, still on the other end of the phone, which was now lying on the floor. My heart was pounding faster and harder than I've ever felt before, and I could hear a rushing noise which seemed like it came from inside my head. After what seemed like 10 minutes, but was probably around 1, he turned and walked to the door to the stairs. As he opened the door, he turned back, looking straight at me and held up the key, swinging it back and forth and grinning. And then he disappeared through the door. I started crying and picked up the phone, explaining what happened to my very worried sister. She told me to call my mom and stay with her for the night, which I did. Of course, the next day I got the locks changed, but I'm still terrified that he'll come back and try the key. I'm much less naive, and have stopped going for late-night walks. This incident happened last week. I had just finished up my summer classes, so now I have time to share this with you guys. Quick reference, I'm a 5'2", 105-pound female. I was visiting my parents and decided to go down to the park by their house to write poetry. I love writing poetry at the gazebo in that park because it's surrounded by a beautiful garden that inspires my writing. The park is behind their house, but you have to walk past 2 baseball fields and a stretch of grass to get to the gazebo. When I got to the park and sat in the gazebo, there were a bunch of people that seemed to be having a party of some sort over by the shelter and picnic benches. After sitting there, writing for about 20 minutes, a guy wearing a yellow neon shirt and talking on the phone walks over towards me. I thought this was a bit strange because this guy was a bit away from the rest of the crowd, and the gazebo was tucked away behind a garden. The park is big enough that to come over specifically in my direction was a little strange. He was speaking Spanish, and I know some Spanish, but I only heard bits and pieces of what he was saying because it was hard for me to keep up with a native speaker. Whenever I speak Spanish with someone, I usually have to ask them to slow down a little, so naturally I didn't catch all of what he was saying. But I do know that he kept saying, "blonde girl." My hair is bleach blonde, but so are millions of other girls, so I didn't read too much into it. I also heard, "When will you be here?" Throughout the conversation, he kept glancing over at me, but after a few minutes, he went back to the party. A couple minutes later, a guy walks over by me in the same spot as the last guy. He was also on the phone, speaking Spanish. Like the previous guy, I only caught bits and pieces of what he was saying, but he also kept repeating, "blonde girl." This raised some red flags, but neither of these guys looked very frightening. They were both very handsome and clean-cut, so they didn't send off any creeper vibes. After a couple of minutes, he also went back to the party. About 30 minutes went by, and I noticed the party was starting to clear out. At this point, I was the only one left in the park. I had to go to the restroom, so I got up and started walking towards them. I saw a rusty dark blue pickup truck sitting at the entrance and exit of the park. It was just sitting there idling, so I thought it was weird that it didn't seem to be going anywhere. As I got closer, it pulled away and turned to the right. After that, I tried not to think anything of it. I went to the bathroom and headed back to the gazebo to continue riding. A bit later, I lifted up my neck to stretch it because it was feeling stiff. When I looked up, I saw the same rusty blue truck sitting in the parking lot in the space which was closest to my location. It was facing the far exit, so I only saw the passenger side of the truck. At this point, it wasn't dark out, but the sun had already begun to set. From where I was, they were close enough that I could tell there were a few men sitting in the truck. The passenger side window was down, and the guy in the passenger seat was looking in my direction. He was wearing a neon yellow shirt. I looked closer and noticed it was the same guy who was talking on the phone, who kept saying blonde girl and asking when someone would be there. I picked up my notebook and started walking quickly back on the stretch of grass past the baseball fields that leads to my parents' house. As soon as I started to walk away, the truck started driving too. It looked as if it was going towards the far exit, but as I kept walking, it turned around to go towards the other where they were idling earlier. From where I was, I could get a full view of it, so they certainly had a full view of me as well. I started to walk faster, and they started driving faster as well. They turned left, which was the direction I was walking. We were parallel, with maybe about 50 feet of grass between them and me, so they wouldn't have been able to get to me unless they got out on foot. And the speed limit on that road is 40 miles per hour, but they had to have been going about 20. The guy on the driver's side kept peeking his head out and staring at me, so I was afraid they were going to park the truck and get out on foot. They finally went under an overpass, around a curve, and were no longer visible. Maybe I'm thinking too much into this, and I'm sorry if it's not as creepy as the other stories on this sub, but I can't help but feel stopped, and that they were planning something and figured I wouldn't understand any Spanish when they were talking to me. I'm not entirely sure what to think of it, but my gut tells me that these guys weren't entirely harmless. This is actually the second scary encounter I've had while writing poetry in the park, but at least I wasn't directly attacked in this one, like I was in the one that happened a few years ago. I once thought that writing was a healthy outlet for me, but now it only seems to be getting me in trouble. If you guys are interested in any other encounter, let me know and I'll share it in another post. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback in the comments below, as well as perhaps like, share, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have a personal story that you'd like to submit, or you'd like to just send me a message, links to all of my social media will be in the description for the video below. This includes my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the theme of the story is, if it has any, the name of the story, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious at all about the music used in this video, the music is always listed in the description below, in the order which it appears. I also have links to the artists and list the tracks by name, just in case you want to find more of their work. Last but not least, if you have any criticism, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.